Hi there, everyone. Welcome to The Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's July 29th. Do you have children or grandchildren? If so, a Peter Rabbit garden is a lovely idea for you to consider. Of course, Peter Rabbit is the creation of Beatrix Potter, who was a noted botanist and mycologist. In making your Peter Rabbit garden, you could add a little wooden fence or a little stone wall around the perimeter. Here are just a handful of the herbs and edibles that are included in this series: mint, chamomile, lavender, sage, lettuce, beets, radish, and rhubarb. Here's today's brevities. On this day in 1810, Thomas Nuttal, just 24 years old, jumped in a birch bark canoe with Aaron Greeley, the deputy surveyor of the Territory of Michigan, and they paddled to Mackinac Island, arriving 2 weeks later on August 12th. Nuttal spent several days on Mackinac. He was the first true botanist to explore the flora of Michigan. Nuttal documented about 60 species, including the dwarf lake iris, which later became the state wildflower of Michigan. And it's the birthday of Edith Coleman, an Australian naturalist and prolific writer who was born on this day in 1874. Until recently, little was known about Coleman. The author Daniel Claude wrote a book about Coleman called The Wasp and the Orchid, which explored how Coleman went from being a housewife until the age of 48 and then transformed into one of Australia's leading naturalists. Coleman had a special appreciation for orchids. Beginning in January of 1927, one of her daughters told her that she had seen a wasp entering the flower of the small-tongue orchid backwards. The odd behavior was perplexing, especially after Coleman dissected the plants and discovered that they were male. Coleman continued to study the wasp behavior, and she finally discovered that the wasp was fertilizing the orchid. The orchid uses this stealth pollination strategy to trick the male wasps into thinking they're meeting with a female wasp. By getting the males to enter the plant is able to be pollinated. Coleman became the first woman to be awarded the Australian Natural History Medallion, and Coleman will forever be remembered for her groundbreaking discovery about orchid pollination. And today is the anniversary of the death of Ryan Gainey, the landscape designer extraordinaire who died on this day in 2016. Gainey died trying to save his beloved Jack Russell Terriers from a fire at his home. Neither he nor his dogs survived. When it came to landscape design, Gainey was completely self-taught. In the documentary about his life called The Well-Placed Weed, Gainey asked the filmmaker, "I've had a wild life. Do you know why?" His reply was simple and 100% Gainey. "I created it." Gainey purchased his home in Decatur, Georgia. It used to be the site of Holcomb Nursery. After he bought it, Gainey set about removing many of the greenhouses that were in place behind his home, but he kept the low brick walls that had served as the foundation for the greenhouses. The result was that he instantly had a series of garden rooms that he could decorate and design to his heart's content. Over the course of his career, Gainey became friends with other notable designers and gardeners like Rosemary Veary and Penelope Hobhouse. Gainey loved Veary. They had a special bond. And he also loved the Camellia japonica. Gainey's signature design was gardens that looked effortless, with things spilling over and nestled in a way that made them look like they had been in the garden for decades. It was Gainey who said, "Where lies the genius of man? It's the ability to control nature, but for one purpose only, and that is to create beauty." 148 days before Gainey passed away, an enormous white oak fell and crushed his house. Gainey considered the tree to be the soul of his life. And it was on this day in 1931 that newspapers were starting to report that Louis Schubert and August Rosenberg had the distinction of being the first recipients of a patent for a plant. The plant was the first ever blooming rose, which they had named the New Dawn. A plant patent gives the exclusive right to reproduce, use, or sell an invention or discovery throughout the United States for a period of 17 years. In Unearthed Words, here's a verse from Sarah Coleridge. Hot July brings cooling showers, apricots, and gillyflowers. And here's an old verse from England. A swarm of bees in May is worth a load of hay. A swarm of bees in June is worth a silver spoon. A swarm of bees in July is not worth a fly. And today's book recommendation is The Education of a Gardener by Russell Page. Page is one of the legendary gardeners and landscapers of the 20th century. First published in 1962, the book is filled with charming anecdotes and timeless gardening advice. For today's garden chore, now is a great time to deal with your iris. By now, your irises are probably finished blooming. You can go ahead and cut off the dead flower stalks, but not the leaves. Iris use their swords, the green leaves, to nourish rhizomes for the following year. Since they're dormant, you can divide them now if necessary as well. Replant them as soon as possible, and remember to cut off about 2/3 of the foliage to compensate for the root loss. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1951, the botanist Charles Clement Deem wrote a reply to an inquiry about the honeysuckle. Deem wrote, "That plant's name is to me the same as a red flag to a bull. I cannot tell you in words how I regard this vine. Your question is, does it propagate from seed? I do not believe it does. I have never heard a good word for it. All that I can say affirmatively is that it is no good for anything." And in concluding his condemnation of the honeysuckle, he twice suggests that some of the new insecticides might kill it. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.